to tell me how to activate the tribal shield because you haven't told me yet either. I've been talking to them with it, for like weeks on this. They told me we were going to teach tribal shield activation. I was like, well, great. I'll be able to do that. When can you teach me what you're talking about? Well, they told me last night. That's where we got the final part. It was on a security clearance. That's why sometimes, once in a while, I'll have a workshop that's late because they throw it at me right before, and all of a sudden I have like 20 or 30 pages that I have to do sometimes. Because there's certain data that's on security clearance. It takes 3 days. Now, when the Brenno up in Density 5 send down security information, let's say it's frequency wrapped. It's coded. So any of the fallen angelics that try to get at it, they can't immediately get at it. There's about a 3-day delay factor before they can decode stuff. So I tend to get stuff as close to the time when it's supposed to be delivered so they can't come up with a counter strategy to try to do something. There's certain people that are supposed to be here to get this information or being guided to it and they don't want them to have it. They can arrange something where they don't get there. I mean, they can do a lot of things if they know about it in advance. So I get the kind of like 24-hour warning sometimes. The information I was given on the tribal shield and how to activate it, and I was amazed. I'm thinking, oh God, it's one of those really, really complicated things, isn't it? I was ready to duck because after they gave me the Maharic seal, there's like 20-odd some steps to that thing, and I was thinking, it gets easier as you do it, but don't expect me to remember that many steps because I just can't hold them. That's why we do them on tapes. So I was almost dreading another 20-odd step program. I was thinking, well, if it's really necessary and that's what we need to do, all right. It wasn't. It was fascinating what it was. It was a list of 12 names. 12 names that used to be sung. They were the names of the tribes. They're called the Sons, P-S-O-N-N-S. The Sons were the sacred sounds that activated the 144 fire letters in the core of the DNA template, which is the tribal shield. You have your own personal Maharic shield that gives you your individuation from your Christos level down in your form. But that is connected to a larger shield that is your species shield, your tribe. It's a place where your Christos connects to the race's Christos, connects to the universe's Christos. The tribal shield is the core template that the DNA and your Maharic shield, which is your D12 level, is built on. When you activate the tribal shield, it kicks the whole template into activation. There are several steps that we will go over to create the fastest and safest and most effective activations of the DNA template. When you're activating DNA, you're doing a lot more than DNA. You are activating Merkaba, you are activating chakras, you are releasing something called crystal seals that are in the body in the main vertical current. There's a whole chain reaction of things that happen. You're releasing cranial sacral seals. All of these things take place concurrently. When you do one, you're doing the other. So when I talk about DNA, I'm not just talking about, okay, we'll look over here at our DNA. This is activating all sorts of things. I was amazed that it could be that simple. Now, the names are fascinating. The names of the tribes, which I will show in a little while. The names of the tribes are in a very sacred language called the Anahazi language. That was the language of the Mua race, the first Palladic cloister race in the third seeding. But it was first the language of the Elohai Elohim. It was the first spoken, audible language in this time matrix. It contained all of the primal sounds. It contained the activation keys for the DNA templates, not just of humans, but of all the life forms here that were built on those primal sounds and light. This is the sacred language, the Christos language that has been hidden. It has been removed from the planet whenever possible by fallen angelics and Illuminati humans because they knew what it could do. It could set us free. The names have been given in their spelling and sounding of the Lemurian race, of the Anahazi language. It's a fascinating language. Sometimes I hear it singing. I can hear a part of me that's in another time vector using it. They would go out. The groups of Palladian races would go out regularly, groups of them, and they would have a morning ceremony and an evening ceremony. These are the Breatharians, remember? This is how they kept themselves as breatharians. They would use the tones, activate their tribal shields, and make their Merkaba fields spin very fast, where they would bring in more and more and more energy. And it would hold enough energy in the body to sustain them to the next day with no problem. We'll talk about that a little bit tomorrow in the salutations, because that's what they were called. They weren't worshiping the sun and moon. They were pulling very specific frequencies from the solar and lunar light spectra. Do people want a break or something? Because I noticed some people are like getting sleepy. No, okay, good, because some people look a little bit like they were getting sleepy. Okay, now, I think, yeah, we'll go into this. To be a little more clear, when I talk about planetary shields, running it into the planetary grids, I'm going to show you this. Some of you have seen it before, working with the work others haven't. Planetary shields are the scalar grids templates for each three-dimensional level of the planet. This is the stuff that our DNA templates have the ability to affect. Our DNA templates are like open conduits that will bring frequency down through the planetary Merkaba fields and literally run it into the planetary grids and circulate it back. The way we were supposed to help the planet was the planet has the 4 density levels of its shields. We're trying to anchor this, the shield of Aramatena, the D4 Christos liquid light template. We're trying to bring the original coding of this back down through these grids to realign them, because there's distortions and reversals of fire letters in the grids down here. The humans were created in a very special way for this mission. They were created in a way that the specific arrangement of fire letters that were up here in this part of the planetary grids, that were no longer here because they'd been messed up, humans were imbued with these patterns in the DNA template, these fire letters. So when they were on planet and a stellar activation cycle would happen, they would activate their Maharata current, their D12 current in the body, and they would progressively run through their body the codes in their DNA template, which were the same codes as the planet's D4 Christos template. We were piece by piece putting back the template. That was the mission we were on. Each one of us carries a piece of that frequency. When we look at our race now, there's so many people who are sleepers, so many people who have DNA template distortion because they've been messed with, because they got interbred with Anunnaki lines or Draconian lines here or there in their evolutionary imprint. Every time that happens, more of the fire letter sequences that this planet needs to get its grids back to what it was supposed to be in density 4, we lose a little piece of that. We can make a difference if we recognize each one of us has a gift. And if we give that gift, it'll be given back 1,000,000-fold. The gift is frequency. It's a gift you give to yourself, but at the same time you'll be giving it to the planet. So when I talk about planetary shields, you can picture them as disks of scalar waves, which are little wave points that stand in one place and flash on and off. Little wave grids. If you go over here, you can find something called a Kathara grid. It's basically a light sound grid. That's what Kathara really means, the basic meaning of it. This you'll probably recognize if anybody knows Kabbalah. This is very similar to the Tree of Life grid that's used in Kabbalah. It's also different. If anybody knows the Kabbalah systems, they will usually use 10 or 11 spheres, circles. Interesting, because that tells you something, what code they're working on. There are 11 systems, and there are 10 systems. You'll also find they tend to reverse the pillars, and they call the one on the left like the tough one. That's the path of, the hard path. That's actually a Stargate path. This is what this has always been about. The Tree of Life grid shows the basic structure of how the universal template is created. And that structure is the core structure of every other thing that manifests. You have a Kathara grid inside of you, a 12-point grid that has energy interface lines that all your other energy systems and then your matter systems are built on. The universe has one too. The universal one that runs energy through our time matrix. Those centers represent Stargate points, crossover points between dimensional frequency that cycle and hit certain vibrations at certain times repeatedly, and when they hit certain vibrations at the same time, they open. Each of these 12 spheres, they call them, I believe, Sephiroth in the Kabbalistic teachings, each of them represents one set of full dimensional frequencies. When you have the 12, you're dealing with the base 12 system, which is the Maharata, the Christos system. When you see grids like this that are being run on 11, this is a little clue you can use if you're looking at other people's teachings. Watch for it. Some use 12. Watch for the ones that use 11 or that use 10. Why are they using 10 or 11? When the structure, the universal order, is 12. It's a question worth asking and worth feeling out for yourself. The people who are doing it probably don't know the difference, because this information has been taken from us for so long. The very well-meaning people, some of them are using really not good systems because they just don't know any better. They don't realize that there used to be 10 Sephiroth on a natural tree of life. They don't realize that there's a 12-strand DNA template that matches it in the body, and there's 12 axiotonal lines in the planetary grids that match it. Little twists like that. You can learn some things about looking. Various teachings. Keep an eye on 10s, 11s, and 12s, just to give yourself an idea of who you feel comfortable with. Watch the 13s, too, because there's one of them that try to use D13 frequency in a reverse matrix. They're Anunnaki. I'll let you find those. You'll trip over them if you need to at some point, but scan the internet. You'll find a lot of it. Anyway, we're back to understanding the shields, the planetary shields. These are the things we're going to affect with our DNA templates. The thing is, we're going to affect them one way or the other. If we're carrying mutations in our DNA template now, which most of the race is because of what has happened to this race gene code, we are going to run those distortions into the grids. We're going to help them create pole shift. We can clear the distortions in our templates by running the Maharata current and learning a few simple steps of things to activate in the body. Activation doesn't happen all at once. It's not like popping a pill, boom, you're fixed. This stuff takes a while. You work with it. It cycles. You go through periods where you start to really think, yeah, I think my DNA is activating. I feel like I'm on fire for the last 4 hours. You get heat flashes sometimes. I mean, there's some symptoms with this. But at least that shows you you're doing something. You know, if it just had no effect at all, you say, it mustn't be affecting my DNA, you know, but you get some proof. You can clear your own DNA template, which will help you. But it will also help the planet, because your system is going to be running frequency into the planet, whether or not you're doing it consciously. If you're willing to do it on a 12 code, it'll help you, it'll help the planet, and we may not have to deal with, by June of 2002, the issue of, okay, are we doing evac? Because to be honest with you, if it goes that far, it's going to break my heart to have to bring that message to people. Because I told them from the beginning, I'm a speaker, and I'll do anything to serve people. The only reason I'm here is because I care so much. But please don't make me tell them that it's going to get bad. You know, I don't want to tell people that. I don't think it is, because I think there's enough people who pay attention, who care, and who are going to make a difference. We're doing at this point planetary shields clinics, they're called, where we're taking groups of people that want to go. And believe me, if we had a lot of money, we'd be glad to take everybody for free. We don't. They're trips that are run through like a travel agency thing, and they control all that part. I just do the programs. But we get there. We get there and we do the grid work. That's some of the things we're doing. To do the grid work, I mean, you guys can do that too. You can be drawn to a place, say, hey, I'm going to do grid work here. We're going to teach you, before this is over today, is how to create something called a Q zone. A Q zone is, one way you could look at it, is a safe zone. It's an area that you can create in the planetary grids by activating your tribal shield and running your D12 Maharata current. You can create a space in the grids that space, for about 5-yard radius, about 5 yards out, will resonate to D12. You will anchor a piece of the Christos template there. Now, 5 yards out, you may be out of that zone. But in that area, that is where you can stand, and if you were a channel and not protecting your biofields, it's one of the few places you'd be safe anyway, because it's linking pieces of the planetary grids to its Christos template. When you activate your tribal shield and you run the Maharata, and the more you do it, the more of that frequency you can actually pull. You'll pull just little bits of it at first. But once you start pulling it, You can make areas in the planetary grids safe simply by consciously choosing to turn the DNA on, which means choosing to say, okay, I'm going to activate the tribal shield, and some of this you can do without having to be totally audio. You can do it like there's singing involved. You can do it in your head, but it's more effective if groups do it outside and use them. They used to sing them like mantras. You can code the grids. You can pick an area. You can pick your bedroom. You can pick your living room. You can start there. Create safe zones, clear zones, Christ zones. They're Christos zones. You will have the power to do this. And it's so simple to think that we have right in our DNA the ability to simply turn this stuff on. We do have it. Now there's going to be an advantage to knowing about Q zones, because they will connect to something called Q sites that we'll talk more about tomorrow. Q sites, Templar Q sites, are the main sites that connect. They're the activation sites for the stargates that connect directly to the inner Earth stargates. When you create small Q sites, Q zones, little safe zones, if there's a need for evacuation at any time, they will be like tunnels where you can connect the frequency there with the frequency at the main Q sites. Somebody will be able to get to you. This is why they're asking us to create them everywhere, because it can get to you, but other people can use them. If somebody happens to walk into a Q site that you sat and something goes bad, and they can be reached by guardians at that point. Somebody from inner Earth could pick up on them and say, come on, get them, if the place is going to roll or something. You can literally create shelters this way. That's not the main purpose for it. The main purpose for it is every time you make one of these, you're helping it so we might not need them as far as evac goes. Because the more of the D12 frequency you anchor into the planet and keep there, the more likely we'll be able to stabilize the stargates and break Nibiru's hold on the solar stargate, because this is what has to be done. I mentioned before, in 25,500 BC, it was during an event called the Lucifer Rebellion. We'll get into Lucifer tomorrow and why he's called that. It's actually a family name. They got control, the Stargate 4. This place will roll, and they knew it would roll, as long as they're holding it out of alignment. In order to stop what they're trying to do, in order to make sure we at least have the chance to move through without a pole shift, we need to re-secure Gate 4, which means Gate 6 has to be open to override it. The Guardians are going to open Gate 6. This is what our Kauai trip is about. They're going to open Gate 6. We're going to help them anchor the frequency into the grids. Then we have 2 other trips that are going to go to the specific areas where they're locking in Nibiru into our grids. And we're going to break the connection. That's the first step. On the personal level, it can be very valuable to have Q zones and to make them, because these are areas where you can go to meditate, that you can be more confident that nothing's going to bother you there. You can open yourself there, you can sleep there. Put one in your bedroom, sleep in one. Then nothing's going to mess with you while you dream. But in the meantime, if we can begin to just go into our DNA templates and look at it different. DNA is like this thing out here you hear about in science. If we start to realize we have a crystalline template, let's look at it as crystals. Let's look at it as living consciousness that lives within you, that holds more of your consciousness than you've been having here. Your connection to your tribe, your connection to the universe, to the planet. This is what you can activate when you begin to activate the tribal shield. I'm going to move a little bit ahead, I think. Let me see if I want to put this one up here. Yeah, I'll show them this one. This sounds good. How you doing? This is another one that was in the all-night mission. Okay. When I'm talking about the Earth's planetary Christos divine blueprint, this is the basic structure of it. Shows the Cathara grid, which would represent the 12 stargates. Now each of them are keyed. Stargate 1 is dimension 1, dimensional frequency bands 1. Stargate 2, dimensional frequency bands 2, all the way up to 12. Well, when we get into here, here's where we're doing the cycle of the rounds. We have round 1 as these 3. You basically have 4 rounds, each with 3 time cycles in them. These are where your incarnations are placed. We'll get to that a little later. There's another one that shows it on the personal level. But this one is showing the planetary divine blueprint in the time frames that are broken down. Round 1, you had the Pleiadian cloister races, 798,000 BC to 208,000 216 BC. That was their piece of the planetary Christos pattern. And over here was round 2, the next one, the Urtite cloisters, 208,100 BC to 75,000 BC. These 3 time cycles, they were dropping their part of the frequency in. Over here, we had the round 3, which are the cloisters. They were dropping their frequency in, 73,000 BC, actually into the future. Part of them are here now, and they're doing it, and they go into the future time cycles. And here we are in 4. And we're also moving into the future. This one started, the root races started coming in, 71,000 BC, and they're still coming in up into the future from what this point is. These 4 pieces here, this part of this diagram, is actually have a Star of David in there too, that shows the basic geometrics that are happening between, where the energy is running between them. But these here that form what's often called the Templar cross, these guys right here, they're the 4 rounds. The Templar cross used to be the symbol of the Elohai until it was hijacked by the Anunnaki when they decided they were going to steal the Templar. But ours was always green. They colored theirs red. You can find it in some of our, our conquests and those kind of things in medieval times. But this is why that symbol was used. It was a symbol that originally represented the Christos template, the planetary Christos template, and it stood for the fulfillment of the planetary Christos mission, which was a mission that was commissioned to one race, the angelic human race. It was our job. And what happened in our time vector, in our cycle of the rounds, was our greatest strength became our greatest weakness. We were very heart-centered. The Pleiadian races were very heart-centered. That's wonderful. They were very Christed beings. They kept their strands activated, usually to strand 6, and they turned it on as high as they wanted to when they needed the current. There's also a blind spot. They knew divine love, but they weren't too educated in divine responsibility and divine accountability, because they wanted so much to be loving, and they wanted so much for the other fallen angelic races to be fixed. They wanted them to be better. They wouldn't ever think that they could possibly do anything that would be that bad. There was a naivety to those races that came from a desire to really need, rather than just want to see the best, to need to, because there was a fear. There was a fear of having to deal with things that were not pleasant. It was a denial factor. And great messes were created because of that. This is why this test is repeating over and over. We're getting another dose of it here. The people in the New Age movement, some of them, God bless them, the channels, oh, I don't need a Maharic seal. Angel so-and-so's taking care of me. So did you check Angel so-and-so's resume? You want to look at this stuff, people. What is really sad is what's happening in the New Age movement under the names of very ancient gods and highly respected angelic types. Who are these people? We need to ask. There's some information that's going to be released in the books, the Voyager's book coming out. It's probably going to get a lot of people upset with me, because they're giving the histories as they were recorded in the CDD plates. These are the official history documents that are held by the Sirius B people and a bunch of the others, the founders' teachings on the history. They're giving the history of Enoch, of Toth, of Yod-Heh, Vod-Heh, of Jehovah, of all these names we've come to look at with awe, of Archangel Michael, of Galactic Federation, all these real popular names. We need to start understanding who these people are, because they're back and they're doing the same things they were doing before. The cycle of the rounds, the Christos, the fulfillment of the Christos mission. That was what we came here for originally. We got kind of lost along the way because we let our wishful thinking get in the way of us seeing how it really was, so we didn't take accountable, effective action. There were times when we trusted. We trusted beings to do what we wanted them to do, rather than trusting them to act characteristically to what they were. There's a difference. You can trust a being completely and never be betrayed if you simply trust it to act in coherence with its own nature. And then you need to ask yourself, what is this nature? So then I don't place expectations on that being that are going to get me hurt. If you give someone too much trust, and they're just really not in a place where they're going to treat that respectfully, is it their fault that they hurt you? Or were you equally responsible because you weren't sensitive enough to where they were to say, this is really a dumb thing to do. I'm not going to trust this situation. I'm going to say, excuse me, I can love you, but I'm going to do it from a distance. Our race, as the Palladians, Palladorians, let us in. They let the Nephidim in. These are the draconian races. They let them in on bioregenesis, and they started to believe them when they started to say, well, why? You don't need to run the Maharata current all the time. It's a little bit too strong in your field. It really bothers me. So would you mind not running it today? Sure, dear. Yeah. They got them to stop running the Maharata current on a daily basis because they were being set up. The angelic humans were being set up to get it low enough in the field where there wasn't enough frequency in the field so the higher up D10 draconians could start doing field attachments. And that's how it started. That's what's being done here again. It's a lot easier now because we don't even remember how to run the Maharata current. And it's not hard. It's just remembering you have that main vertical current, activating certain things by running frequency, and then simply breathing with the current. If we can remember that we fit here someplace, each one of us belongs here. We actually have 1,728 of ourselves here. And if you happen to be an indigo child, it's like lots more than that. I think it goes up to 6,000 some hundred in one of the time cycle, like one of the cycles of the rounds. Let's see, we'll go on to the next one, I think. The round tables. Okay, let's see. Okay, just going to scan this to see if there's anything I didn't cover yet. Okay. Yeah, I'm going to the next one too. Maybe a couple of them. I want to get to a certain point, and then we're going to get into the tribal shield activation, which is very interesting because I will be learning this with you because this was given to me last night and I haven't had time to practice it, which is okay. I kind of like it that way. When that happens, then we're all in the same boat. I'm just passing on something I just learned, so we learn together. That means we're at the same frequency when we start. Okay. All right, this is worth talking about a little bit. Now, this is some of the stuff that if you want the chart pack, it'll be here tomorrow, that it covers all of this stuff. 12 cycles, simultaneous incarnation in DNA. This is what applies to you as a person directly and your other selves. It's basically the individuals that are incarnated within the other cycles of the rounds. These are you. The Palladia races, the Urtite cloister races, the cloister races, and the root races. You have selves there. You can link your frequencies here. If you can run your Maharata, you can get them to run theirs. You can make an intertime link. If you want to know your soul history, this is how you find it. It's not a history that's dead someplace, that's living in a book or somebody wrote down. They might have wrote it down, but these are living histories. You're alive in those places. When you activate the DNA strands, when you get strands 4, 5, and 6 activated, you become what's called an embodied soul. That means you have 6-dimensional consciousness. You are fully aware that you are manifesting as numerous different people in different time frames. You reclaim your eternity as you activate DNA strands. Your eternal self that was always yours. But you also reclaim your memory piece by piece. You start to remember. You may have images of the fall of Brennoi, because all of us were associated with the dramas that took place with these other races in this time vector. There's a huge amount of trauma that we carry on a deep cellular imprint that's causing us pain because of the pain that was experienced in this cycle of the round with our other selves. We call it our karmic imprint, but it's a living imprint, and it's an imprint that we can shift. There were times like in 208,216 BC when the Magi races and the angelic humans were trying to save the stargates from being invaded. It was a horrible time for some of us. People, I've met several people who were having bleed-throughs. They just see images of temples, like kind of like Egypt type, but not exactly, and just really sad feelings attached to it. You may start to get little pieces of bleed-through. You may see something on TV and all of a sudden it just triggers tears. Where did that come from? When you have those kind of experiences, you're starting to tap in to the other selves, the other 1,728. Somebody out there reacted to what you just saw that would create that kind of spontaneous burst. It might be somebody from here. It might be your inner child self, from this life. When you start to go multidimensional, you need to know what to look for so you don't scare yourself half to death. You start to get crying jags because stuff is coming up to bother you sometimes. Or if you start to do DNA activations and you're getting heat rushes and you feel like you're going to explode and it's like making your mind feel really weird and you're afraid of what you're going to do, these things can be scary. They don't have to be. If you can remind your mental body that this is just cycling, I'm awakening, I'll be okay. Now, let's see if there's anything in here that we need to get into to do the thingy. Okay. All right. This is where I don't need to get. This isn't that important now, but it is in the writing stuff that it gets into how we have like 216 cells in each of the 4 rounds, so we like kind of know how many cells we have in each of the cycles of the rounds and that kind of thing. There is a breakdown, whereas it's very specific. We have 216 cells in 4 rounds equals 864 cells within one of those cycles of the rounds. There's a simultaneous cycle of the round going on in parallel Earth. Okay? So you actually have 864 cells here, 864 in parallel. They're all imbued into your DNA code. And that's only if you're 12-strand. That's a 12-strand pattern. All right? So you have a total of 1,728 cells, but that's where they're located. You have 216 of them in each of those 4 rounds, and that would mean you'd have 864 of them in the particle universe and the same number in the antiparticle universe. And you're all evolving simultaneously, filling out and activating the DNA template. So it's kind of like little factoids that are interesting. If you're wondering how your incarnations work, there is a real pattern to this. And there are ways of finding yourself. So it's kind of neat, because at least now you learned one thing, that there are these 4 rounds, and there was a race name. A basic, like race. There were the Urtite cloisters, there were the Palladia Urtite cloisters, and each of those race cycles had 5 races involved with them. You probably had one of each in each of the cycles. They haven't broken it down yet to say exactly how many of Muas and how many Yus and how many of that, but I think it goes that far. So at least you know where to look. If you're interested in who you were and who you are in those other time vectors, it gives you a framework to say, okay, so I was part of this cycle. I'm somewhere in there. Who was I in that time frame? It gives you a place to start looking. And you'll find it if you start looking. Knowing who you were in the other time vectors helps, because if you're starting to get bleed through that's on a subconscious level, that's affecting your life here and you don't quite realize it, you'll catch it faster and you'll shift the pattern before it manifests into a classic karmic pattern where you're walking the same path. The path that people have walked here to get to where they are right now is not a path any of us want to repeat again. The problem is we repeated a mistake over and over. This is our chance to fix it. Okay, let's see what we got next. Yeah, you can wait on these. Okay, I think I did that. Yeah, let's get into activating the tribal shield. I'll even take this one in total sequence. When I get totally new stuff, it's like, yeah, I'll read the textbook. Okay. I'm going to take a little sip of soda here. Oh, that's better. Okay. Now, the stuff that I want to look at. I'm going to start with the activating the tribal shield section. These are the definitions that were basically given, how it was described to me. You have to remember, I just learned on a conscious level what the tribal shield was. In the Ancient of Days, there's other parts of me that knows this, just like there is parts of you that know this too. It's not that I'm teaching you or that anybody taught me. We're just all being helped to remember what's stored in our DNA because this information is there. So the 12th dimensional tribal shield is the dormant species divine blueprint, and it's within the DNA template core of the angelic human races of the 4 evolutionary rounds. The frequencies of energy and dimensions of consciousness of the 1,728 simultaneous selves of the personal eternal Christos identity can be activated in one incarnation through sequential activation of the fire letter sequences or flame codes of the tribal shield. Usually, as you're evolving simultaneously in those 4 rounds, there's a process, a slower process, by which the DNA slowly activates and brings in frequency in a slower way. That's why you'll have incarnations where, well, this time you'll become an avatar, but back in that time you didn't. That was like the pre-avatar stage. Maybe you'll activate strands 1, 2, and 3 in this lifetime, and then you move your consciousness into this lifetime where you do 4, 5, and 6. There's a way to do it all in one lifetime. It's the quick way home. It's through the tribal shield. With the tribal shield, you're tapping into the frequencies of not just your individual self anymore, or your 1,728 individual selves. You're reaching larger. You're reaching into a collective of energy that is the human species collective, the angelic human species. So the amount of energy you can bring through is tremendous compared to what just you and your 1,728 selves can do. The tribal shield is like finding your long-lost family. It's part of you. There's a consciousness there. There's parts of the tribal shield that are from other parts that are directly related to your 1,728 selves that are from other species in the universe that interact with our species. They remember you. You'll remember them. When you get into the tribal shield activation, it's taking the inner Christos level activation to a whole other level. It's expanding it even larger. On technical terms, it's the flame codes that are important. The flame codes are simply the prime 144 fire letters, which are 12 fire letter sequences that are held in the DNA template. They're basically, each DNA strand of this 12-strand template can be looked at as one sequence of fire letters that contains 12 fire letters. 12 times 12 is 144. You have 12 strands times 12 fire letters each. That's your prime flame codes, your 144 fire letters. This is what certain aspects of mystical schools that have to do with religions have been trying to figure out exactly what they are for a very long time. They're having a hard time because 6 of the letters of their alphabet were taken out. And they're trying to use the alphabet alone. But they're missing 6 letters, so they're not going to find the tone combinations. Yes? Sure. Okay, first of all, there's several factors, okay? One of the first factors is going to be the planetary grids themselves, all right? The planetary grids will always regulate how much any being on it can activate and how fast. Because if we all just started to pull in frequency, we could literally blow the grids and make the planet vaporize. So there are much higher systems of organizing the energies. The secondary factor will be the condition of your DNA template to begin with. I mean, a lot of us are doing fine. We don't realize that back in 798,000 BC, something went wrong and we ended up with a mutation that's just sitting there right now. But when we start to try to activate codes, it's going to get in the way and mess things up. So if there are issues in the DNA template that have to be cleared up first, that will slow the process, won't stop it. But first things first. If you want to send water down a chute, you have to make sure the chute's open. So they're going to clear out any template distortions. It can take. You can start. What they're doing right now. You know what? Let me find the one sheet. I'm going to take this question and go into a space that explains a couple of things. Because it's not just the one on, I don't think you saw it. It describes the primary things to do to make the DNA activate fastest. There we go. Okay. Now, the other one. I'm going to put this up because this goes a bit with the question that you asked about how fast does this happen. There are several things that can be done, because there are several things that need to happen for the tribal shield and the DNA to activate the right way. You got to remember, our race has been on a third strand mutation for 25,500 years, the last mess that they did. There was another upgrade in the mutation done in 3,470 BC, when there was even more stuff unplugged. So it's going to take a bit of time, but we're not talking, if, I look at it this way, if it was something that was going to take us 20 years, they wouldn't bother giving it to us right now, because we wouldn't be able to use it. To get a full 12 strand? Is that what you mean? To get up to a full 12 strand or a full activation of the tribal shield? Okay. Full 12. I know. I know we do. They told me that if things were going well, the first 12 strand activations would be in 2012 when the grids could hold it. But I don't think we're going to be waiting that long. I know for a fact that there was work done on January 1st of 2000 with a small group of people, some of them are here, that it was kind of like, it was so wonderful. It was like the blind leading the blind, but everybody's heart was open. You know, they tell us after the fact of why it was so important. We didn't even realize we knew part of what we were doing, but we didn't realize the historical significance of what we were doing. We helped to set a 12-code pulse in the grid for the first time in 210,216 years. We didn't realize it was that serious. We knew we were supposed to help with setting the 12-code pulse. It was, oh my God, not us. Please, please find somebody that knows it better. You know? Yeah. But I do know that with a group of people who were just learning to work with the Maharic seal and just learning to work with this stuff, we were able to bring enough frequency in where we overrode electrical transmissions that were being sent out from Montauk and from Giza that were meant to hold the 10-code pulse there. And we still managed with a small group of people and a few others that were getting guided. It was kind of funny. I didn't know Michael then, but he was being guided over in England to do similar things too by his contacts. But we actually managed to set a 12-code pulse in. They have been trying to do this since it went down in 208,216 BC. It was like, oh my God, we helped to do that? Wow. We can do this quick. I think the answer to the question is going to depend on what phase of what you're doing. Activating a full tribal shield will probably be the last of a sequence of events. All right? There are a few things that need to happen. And these are some of this is the fastest way to get the tribal shield, the full DNA template, activated. You have your tribal shield activation, which is bringing in the 144 fire letters. Now, there's one thing to activate it. There's a different thing to activate it and have sustained activation. If you were to activate your 12 strands right now, you might get them activated for 2 seconds, but if you tried to hold that in your body, you'd probably spontaneously combust. Your cells have to get used to holding that much frequency. Your template has to get used to holding it. So it can let it in little bursts. That's how we set the 12-code pulse. It wasn't like somebody beamed this electrical current through us and we're standing there with our hair standing on end. It was very subtle. There was just I felt a couple little bursts of energy run through my fields. It was a different quality than I was used to. But it starts like that. It starts with little bursts, and then little bursts a little stronger, and you can hold more energy. So it's not something you can get zapped and you're going to have it. You have to learn to hold it. Your body has to learn to hold it. This is why they're given several different ways. They're approaching several different of the issues involved. You have the tribal shield activation that is going to kick the fire letters, all 144 of them, into activation. They will normally be the last thing to activate. After you got the full regular 12-strand template, the outer template, your own personal shield, your Maharic shield, then it would go into activating the tribal shield. That would be the last thing to activate. They're actually putting that first. They're triggering it all into activation. So it's like burning a candle from both ends. Instead of just going this way, building up to that activation, they're activating from this way and from this way, so they'll meet in the middle. So we end up with that. Then these things, the Emerald and Amethyst Awakening, they're two Masters Kundalini activations. These are very specific. They gave us the first one on May 5th of 2000. It was the first time we ever heard of it, at least in this life. They're very specific transmissions that they gave us the procedure and they had people run them on themselves. So we're not zapping you. Zap yourself. That way it's yours. It's something you're choosing to do. You don't need a guru to fix it for you, to do it for you. They open up something called crystal seals in the body. Now, I'll show you something about what the awakenings do, the Kundalini activations, because they're very important. If you're going to run the amount of frequency that you can pull once your tribal shield is activated, you need these seals released to bring it into the body, or it's just going to go dormant. Your body's not going to be able to bring it into the body. Now, I have one diagram in here that I can illustrate exactly what I'm talking about. See if I can find it. There we go. Oops, that's the paper one. Hang on. Just found the paper one, but I can't find the plastic one. Let's see. The reason I'm going to spend a little bit on the awakenings is because tomorrow, for the people who come tomorrow, we are going to offer for the first time the amethyst awakenings. They're just giving us the processes involved with those. Now, this is a basic diagram of the 12-strand DNA template. Okay, I'm going to put that one back up a little bit. Okay, now, if you notice, the round numbers are staggered. They're not directly just simple 1, 2, round 1, round 2, round 3, or anything. They're staggered. That's not that important. That was just to show you that they do plug in to the cycle of the rounds. But these codes in here, these are called fire codes. The 12 fire codes exist between the DNA strands. If the strand template was taking its good old time and doing its usual slow evolutionary pattern, you would have strand 1, 2, and 3 slowly activating their codes in dimensions 1, 2, and 3. And then when they all hit a nice slow meeting point up here, first this fire code would start to go, and it would allow strands 1 and 2 to start to braid. And then this one would go. It's a very slow process, like a slow walk down the evolutionary path. The fire codes, again, would be one of the last things to go. You'd have the smaller coding in the DNA strands, which would be the 12 base codes per strand, which are magnetic codes, and the 12 acceleration codes, which are the antiparticle codes. They would all activate first very slowly. Then it would get around to activating one of the fire codes. What the Masters Kundalini Awakenings do is the first one, the Emerald Awakening, activates this, fire code 1, and fire code 4, which very rapidly allows these to fill in the frequencies much more quickly than they would be able to do. And it allows for these to begin the braiding process. These two will eventually trigger these two into activation, and it will allow the strand braiding to happen much more quickly. Strand braiding is the key to ascension and to transmutation and to bringing in the Antankarana and the Maharada and the Kirashe and the Kundare. It's through strand braiding that the strands become more complex, so they're able to hold more frequency. If you looked at, say, strand 1 was made out of little triangles, and strand 2 is made out of little circles. They're not. I'm just saying, pretend they are, right? When they braid, all of a sudden you have a double pattern. You have little triangles and little circles together. That can hold more than either the triangle or the circle alone. So strand braiding allows for a composite effect to happen where it becomes exponential. The strands can hold more as they braid. So when we're doing the Masters Kundalini Awakenings, we gently release these two, and then the Amethyst Awakening, which none of us have had yet because they haven't given it to us, and that's going to be one of those things that, yeah, we'll be here by morning. But I won't do an all-nighter tonight. Yeah, it's another one of those. It's like, we'll give it to you. It's supposed to be done Sunday. So it's like, oh, so that means like Sunday morning at probably 7 a.m. you're going to give it to me, right? This one is going to release 7, fire code 7, fire code 10, and fire code 12. Fire code 12 ought to be real interesting because that's a lot of frequency in that fire code. That means everything below it's going to be able to start triggering. What they're doing is freeing the whole template up from its phase lock in the time cycles, into the planetary time cycles. So it's a way to, without harming yourself, you can force Kundalini activations that don't clear the strands first and don't do it in sequence, and you just hurt yourself. You know, there are certain systems of exploring energy that try to do that. And they always regret it. They have crashes, they'll get sick physically, or they'll get, they'll get wacky mentally, or they'll have emotional problems, or they'll find themselves fine in physical, but then they'll cross over and realize they made a real mess and they have to reincarnate 20 more times to clear it, Yeah. The system that the founders are teaching is the natural system. If you're going to accelerate something, there's a tolerance level it can be done in. You push it past that, and you're going to cause trouble. They won't teach us stuff that's going to push it past it. The stuff they're teaching us is self-regulatory. When you're running the Maharata current, it will shut off in the body if you pull too much in. You can't blow yourself up with a Maharata current. It has a consciousness of its own, and its will is to be healing, not to be destructive. So anyway, this is basically the 12 strand. This is what the Kundalini activations do. Let's go look at a little bit more of this stuff. I think I can use these two together and keep using, because I want to show you a couple more things before we get into doing the tribal shield. So this would be these, the Emerald and Amethyst Awakening. DNA template bioregenesis. This is a biggie, okay? There are many of the programs that we've been working on and putting out, the tape programs like Tangible Structure of the Soul and even like running the Maharata current, that free Maharic seal thing. All of the techniques that we're putting out fall into the category of bioregenesis. Bioregenesis does a couple of things. The most important thing right now, if you want to activate DNA peacefully, is it progressively purges strand templates of mutations. A mutation in a strand template would be fire letters that are misshapen, that are running in reverse, or that are not in their appropriate sequence, where it's not going to let the natural frequency flow come through them. Those mutations in the DNA strands that we've all picked up because the grids have been so damaged, if we don't clear them, they're going to hang up the energy flow. Some will cause major problems, some will cause minor problems, but it's going to hang up the flow. So if you're going to do tribal shield activation and you're going to do Kundalini awakenings and get that frequency flowing, if you want to be smart, you'll want to get the conduits clear so when it starts to flow, it doesn't blow miasms all over your life, because that can happen. If you're not working, this is why a lot of systems, they'll teach you how to activate Kundalini, but they won't teach you that you have to clear mutations out of the strands. This is why people will have bad Kundalini crashes. Some people that work with Eastern philosophies, they'll have real bad trips. You swear they took LSD and had a bad trip or something. They took a Kundalini trip. But they did it with distortions they didn't know they had. And those distortions will be amplified when you bring the currents through. If you work with bioregenesis technologies, even the temporary Maharic seal, if you use that while you're using any of the other things, it will harmonize anything that starts to get misaligned. It will also shut down if you brought too much frequency in. If you have the Maharic seal up, it will regulate it and it will shut it down so you can't bring any more in until your body synthesizes it. You can look at the Maharic seal as bringing a part of your Christos consciousness down into a pillar around you. So even if you don't get it, that part of you does, and it will help you to regulate the frequencies. So there are various kinds, and some of them can be very fun. You know, they're like meditations, you can relax with them, but you're actually doing the mathematical coding in the body that's going to help to clear the strand templates and little pieces of them. You can look at it as like the little details, the codes in the strands. They're just as important as the big codes in the strands. The bioregenesis will go for different specific areas of the detail, some of it big, some of it small. This is another one, the master key codes. This is something they just threw at me 3 days ago. When they told me I was supposed to start doing privates again, they told me this about 2 weeks ago. Now, I used to do every once in a while private sessions with people who wanted them, and we did what was called Beta-Hoover scans, which were DNA template scans, just to see what the strand content was and that kind of stuff. I started getting sick from doing them because it required me to pull too much energy in from the person's field to read, and I was processing too much of their stuff. Of course, that was before we had the ability to use the Maharic seal, because the grids couldn't hold a 12-code pulse then. Well, I was told to stop doing readings, but recently I was asked to start doing them again. Whole different kind of reading. This was fascinating. Did my first, a couple people who were here, did the first ones like 2 days ago. I'm losing track of days because I haven't slept all night, but they were fascinating. They were finding what's called the master key codes. What is a master key code? And then they showed me this whole system. It's going to be part of the Kathara healing program at some point. But right now it's like level 5 Kathara, but we don't have time to get to there, so they're just using it this way. Every person in their personal Maharic shield has very specific symbol codes that are the master trigger codes for their Maharic template and for the fire codes. This is where you get into the real personal level. We can activate our tribal shield together because we're all part of the human tribe. But then there's the individual part of you. That has very specific symbol codes. I asked, well, why can't we just show people how to find them? And they said, because it'll take them anywhere from 2 to 8 years to be able to access that directly when they're starting from here. Said, you've already been working with this stuff for the last 25 years. You have an advantage. Use it. Help them. And I was asked to give readings to people if they wanted them, and I was learning as we went along. They were telling me, here is how you do it. It came out really neat where you would end up, it was a 12-month program, and you ended up with 3 master codes, and they're pulled from your field. They had me pull them from here, an imprint of them, from the base of the spine, because this information is held in your bodies at the base of the spine, the first of the first 8 cells. And it's where the Christos spark comes in. It carries your core template symbol codes. And then there's a way to use these to progressively bring them into more activation. So this was another thing. I guess I'm still giving them. I don't know. I'm not usually around for privates, but if anybody's interested in them, I would come up. I would make a trip for that if people wanted it. I'd rather find a way to teach you how to do it yourself, because I don't like people getting dependent on me because I can't always be there. But they didn't tell me any further on that, to be honest with you. So as it stands, the only thing I can offer on master codes is I can tell you have them. They told me it takes about 2 to 8 years to get an accurate read out of your own system. And it's kind of like a catch-22. The more of the Maharata you can bring through, the clearer you can get it. But until you can get those codes, you're not going to bring as much of the Maharata. It's a catch-22 thing. This is where they get into this too, the Melchizedek ordinations, level 3 ordination, which is a regent ordination. It begins to release the sacral seals, or the cranial sacral seals. And not all of them, but it gives them a jump start to somebody who can run the rainbow ray frequencies from the primal sound fields. If they can hold that, which would be a level 5 or 6 minister. Now the levels aren't who's better than who. It's about how much frequency you can hold in the body and in the DNA template. Level 5 and 6 ministers are indigo children. They are Magi, because they wouldn't be able to hold that much frequency as just a 12-strand human template. So we offer these. The Azurite Temple offers them. This is the first time we've been allowed in the last, I think, 6 months it's been, since they said we could do level 3 ordinations. They are usually reserved only for inner earth and higher places. Usually they never give them on earth here. But it's an activation that will, again, working with the other things, will give a jump start to your whole system, your whole spiritual integration process. They're doing it now because if somebody doesn't get functional to run these gates, there's going to be a lot of people very dysfunctional, and they know that. So they're basically saying, here it is. Whoever can take it, understand it enough to grab it and run. We hope you will. Not for their sakes, but for ours. So these are the 4 things, or 5 things, that work together. When you use the things together, you will get faster. Like the question was asked, how long does it take? If you're just doing tribal shield, but you're not doing any of the others, it'll take longer than if you're doing the others. That kind of thing. So it'll be very personal. But I would say they want to have everybody that they can activated as high as possible by probably January 1st of 2002. Now, it doesn't mean we're all going to be able to hold the full 12-strand activation, but it should mean that if we're interested in working the programs, we should be able to hold bursts of it and to turn it on temporarily. And your soul usually regulates that, your higher level of consciousness, because you're not going to be sure yet. Well, gee, let's turn it on for 4 minutes and see what happens. So it gets regulated from higher levels of consciousness. But the feeling I'm getting, they haven't told me specifically, but just because I know some of the crucial times that are coming up. We have a lot of work that we're supposed to be doing this year. We're going to Kauai in May, then we're going to Ireland, which we'll find out tomorrow why Ireland's so important. This part amazed me, but that's tomorrow's story. We're going to Ireland and to England, and if those things are successful, then we'll probably be going back to Peru to finish something that they undid after we did it. It has to be redone. Yep, that was right after when they broke the Treaty of Altair, and the Anunnaki bailed out and told us to stick it, basically. Yeah. So the things that we're doing when we go on these planetary shields clinics, the group is actually temporarily activated. I think we spent most of our time in 5th strand D5 consciousness the whole time we were in Peru, because it was and then like people start forgetting things. I remember a number of people said, yeah, I remember some of it, but what happened when we went up there? And I found even I couldn't remember some of it. It's like, well, we must have hit a kind of high strand activation level. So if you're working with groups, you will also activate faster. If you're working with groups that are working with the energy and you're working with the shields, this will help you to hold the activation more. But we have so much work that needs to be accomplished between now and the end of this year that's going to determine whether the Bridge Zone Project Plan A, get the grids back in shape, or Plan B, evac because there's no hope. It's going to determine that. So they're going to activate anybody, your higher selves. If you really want to do this, they will push you as far as you can without harming yourself. They won't let you hurt yourself. So I would say, I'm trying to get I'm still kind of saying, come on, give me a closer time frame answer to that question, because I know you want one and I would like one too. I'm basically getting told that around that framework, around the 1st of 2002, January. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, that's why we're just throwing this out at this point. I mean, we usually don't start a lecture off like we did yesterday. Oh, by the way, pole shift, you know what I mean? I came out and said, oh my God, what did we say? Usually we kind of, ease people into hard stuff like that. But we just threw it out. They're moving fast because it has to be done. It does, yeah. Yes. Okay, level 3s have to be done privately, and they have to be done with 2 ministers. Okay, a male and a female minister, ideally. And we've been doing them together, but it is by appointment. It's not something to try to do a level 3 on a room like they were doing 1 and 2. It would fry the person's transmitting it because so much frequency has to be generated. So we've only done a few level 3s, and they've had us work together, and we each do a part of it. And they prefer it that way, the male female. But if you want, we'll take appointments for them. What are we doing on that? Are we taking appointments for them for next time? That's my advisor here. I don't know. Yeah, we hadn't got that far as scheduling. But basically what I decided, I was thinking, I never get to spend any time or even be available to people when I do come up, because it's always the mad dash for the workshops. If there's enough people that are interested in a combination of ordinations and privates or something that we can afford to come up, I would come up for a few days just for that. We would both come up so we could conduct them. And Michael also does excellent healing work. He is one of the best. He's the only healer I let touch me. He's very, very good. He was well trained for quite a while by the same ones I'm working with, but we didn't know each other then. Anyway, yes. This isn't a Beta Huva that we're doing now. They're different. Okay, this isn't looking at the DNA. This is taking the read right out of the Christos spark. Yeah, I literally have to hail your Christos level and ask it to release if it wants me to have those symbols. And then it's transmitted into my hand. I pull it up and pull it into my pineal, and I get the visual on it. And then I literally draw them out for you. And they're the ones you use to activate progressively. And there's 1 per month for 9 months. And then there's 3 activation ones that you use every time. And it's not a real hard technique. It's once you have the symbols, it's pretty easy to run them. So it's fascinating. I mean, it's oh, neat. That it was new for me, that they were just teaching me how to do this type of private. So I don't know how long I'm going to be doing them. Like the last time, they just had me stop. And there was a bunch of people. I felt really bad. I wanted to be able to do that, but I couldn't because I was told to stop because it was making me sick, and then I can't do anybody justice anyway. These don't make me sick. 2 for 1? I'm sure, as long as we're both available, yeah. Yes, we can do that. That's a very good idea, actually. If anybody wants both of them, that's an excellent idea. Yeah. Okay. Let's see. What else do I want to cover? I want to get into it. I think it's, what time can anybody see the clock?
3 o'clock.
It's 3 o'clock, okay. We're going to take a okay. What time are we taking a break? When?
Around about 3.
Around 3? Okay, I could use a ladies' room run.
Well, you can do it now. It's right time.
Okay. You know what? I think what we're going to do about 8-minute break so people have bathroom run time. Then we're going, like me, then we're going to go into the 12 sacred master songs, which are the 12 tribes' names, which are the way you activate your tribal shield. And we're all going to have some interesting fun trying to pronounce these things together. because there's several syllables to them. So we get like, well, eight is a silly number. Make a 10-minute break. We'll all be back here in 10 minutes, including me, and we'll go from there right into the activation things. What I'll have to do is I'll repeat them to you. More about King Arthur, more about round tables and running them. But before you can run a round table, you need to know the basic things about activating your tribal shield. Because in order to run a round table, which is a group that purposely and consciously activates their DNA to run the codes into the planetary grids to help balance the stargates during a stellar activation cycle, to do that you do have to be able to, know you have a tribal shield and have some idea of what it is. Just a basic core template that connects you to the species, okay? Brings in more frequency than your own template. You can sum it up that way. But to activate it, it's not one of the long, hard, drawn-out, like some of the energy exercises are. Some of them have to be because of the mathematical coding that's needed to get certain activations done. This one was very interesting. I'm sorry I'm not standing up. I'm starting, my ankles are starting to swell because I'm very tired. But I will stand so people in the back can hear me and see me. Now, okay. I'm going to put this up. And you can see why I might have said before, we're going to have fun trying to sound out these names. These are in the Anahazi language, which was the original first auditory language of the Elohai Elohim. It was used by the Mua race in the third seeding, which was the race that had the highest strand template coding. This language would be the basis for all others. All the other ones would come out of it. So it was like the core language in this time matrix as far as audible sound languages go. It's interesting. When we get tomorrow, we're going to get into the 5 Christos languages. And the Christos languages are interesting because they're the sacred languages, but they're combinations of languages that we're familiar with and some that we're not. The Mua language, or the Anahazi language, was the one that was hidden purposely here. All records of it were destroyed because this is the one that had the power to activate the full sequences of fire letter codes in the tribal shield. And if you were a race that was coming in here to try to repress this race, the last thing you wanted them to have was their ticket to freedom, which was the ability to consciously interact with and activate their DNA. Now, we'll get into the other languages, the other 4 Christos languages tomorrow, and show a little bit about how they're combinations of languages that we're familiar with now. I asked it what would be the closest as far as what's known on the planet, closest to this language, and they said, well, it would be a combination of a couple of things. It would be English, Gaelic, French, Hawaiian, and Polynesian. So imagine that. I can't even imagine taking these alphabets, right, putting them together, what you would do with that. But they said that would be the combinations as far as known languages here. That would be the combination that would be used. So it's interesting. There's other people that do stuff on the sacred languages, but what I find very interesting is they're only identifying one of the known languages here. They're not. The sacred languages, the true Christos languages, are combinations that carry more of the fire letter sequences. Languages are intimately connected to our DNA template. Auditory sound is a vibration. And sound originally, language originally, flowed with the natural coding in our DNA templates. We're going to get into a little bit tomorrow about the Tower of Babel. I call it the Babel-on massacre because we've been babbling on ever since and not making a lot of sense to each other. There's a reason for that. And it had to do with scrambling the fire letter sequences in our DNA templates by scrambling them in the planetary grids. They didn't exactly abduct every one of us and twist our fire letters around, but they knew that our DNA templates were intertwined with the planetary grids. If they could create reversals of fire letters and breaking up the natural fire letter patterns in the planetary grids, it would create mutations in the human DNA template, and that's what's been done. So language, we lost the ability to use the ancient languages at that time. We didn't remember them anymore. We didn't have the sequences anymore. We couldn't even make the sounds anymore. There was no cellular memory left. We're getting this back now because the grids are activated on a 12-code pulse, which means our junk DNA, which are the pieces of our languages that went AWire, can be reassembled. So we can now, again, begin to use languages like the Anahazi Mua language. Now, With the 12 tribes, what was really fascinating, what I find an absolute testimony to the eloquence of the designer of our evolutionary blueprint of Source, is the names of the tribes weren't just names. We'll call you Joe tribe and you Bob tribe or you Janet tribe. No, these had meaning. The names were the specific sound tones, the audible translations of the sequences of fire letters carried by the members of those tribes. Now each of the tribes were formed, there are 12 tribes, but they were formed by 5 races, put in different combinations. Each of the races had certain combinations of fire letter sequences in their DNA template, in their tribal shield. Altogether they formed a whole tribal shield, but each of them alone formed a part of it. So there would be different coding. Certain tribes were keyed to certain stargates. You might have tribe 5 might be composed of Mua, Yu, and Rama races, for instance. It wouldn't be just the Ramas had gate 5 and like the Yu had this. There were combinations that were specifically to get the combinations of frequencies that were characteristic to the planetary shields that operated that stargate. They would get the combinations of the races together that would have those frequencies collectively, and they would form a tribe out of that. The tribe names represented the core tonal template of that particular tribe, which means the audible translation of the fire letter sequences that went with the stargate that that tribe was assigned to as guardian, that tribe's DNA template was encoded to. Now, we all have pieces of all of the tribes in us. Every one of us can, I'm not going to say it's easy, but every one of us can trace our ancestry back to one of the original tribes, one of the original 5 Paladoria races. All right? We right now, at this point, have combinations of all of them in us and a few other things that didn't belong there. But basically, every one of us still has a core affiliation with one of the 5 first races and one of the tribes that those races were a part of. We're going to use some things tomorrow to begin to try to identify that. You don't have to know what tribe you were originally out of to be able to run a round table, to be able to activate your tribal shield. What you do is you activate tribe 13, which is the collective tribe. Now, if you can get to the point where you can find what tribe you were originally, what tribe you were most closely coded to, then there's an advantage of being able to activate a little bit more deeply, more quickly, because you can use certain codes that go with that tribe directly. And tomorrow we're going to get into a chart that's out of what's called the Book of Maps and Keys. It shows us where the Stargate locations are, and it also shows us where the Q sites are. The Q sites are the activation sites that have to activate first before the Stargate can open. Okay? So if you know your tribe, you would direct your frequency to that gate directly. If you don't know and you're using tribe 13, you direct it to the central control point for Earth's planetary shields, which is called the Grual point. That is located, it used to be located in a place called Brua, Atlantis. It was part of the Atlantic continent, and it was called Brua. Right now, it's called a quarter mile off the coast of Siesta Key, Florida. It's still there. The name changed, but the place is still there. Okay? So when we're running, we're not going to do a collective run-around table today. We're going to do that tomorrow, because right now we're just going to try to get the tribal shield activations. Then we're going to go into, for those who want to do it, the Emerald Awakening procedure, for anybody who wants to do it, because tomorrow we're going to do the Amethyst Awakening. These are the Kundalini Awakenings. Now, the people who've had them done, nobody's got zapped, okay? I've not had anybody say, well, gee, maybe I've had a little bit of something. It's not one of those that you get activated and you fall apart 3 days later because there's so much frequency flying through your field. But if we're going to do Amethyst Awakening tomorrow, you can't do Emerald and Amethyst on the same day. You need time in between just for the body to adjust to the frequencies. So we're going to allow a little bit of time toward the end of this after we do after we do our first attempt at trying to run these. First we're going to try to pronounce them the right way, the sound tones. And really, what's do tribe 13, thank God, you don't have to run all of them, because we'd be here from here till next Tuesday trying to do this. What you need to do is tribe 12 and tribe 1. This will anchor it, and this will hold the tonings of all the rest of them in. So 12 and the 1 will take you into tribe 13. So these will be the only ones we really have to use. And I still have to look at them and sound them out. What this line under here is, this is the sound outline, where I tried to spell it in a way that it would sound, so you could do it phonetically. All right, these were the spellings. Some of them were close, some of them were different than what they look like when they're pronounced. But they would, tell me what it sounded like, so I would be able to get the tonal on it. So it's the bottom line that we'll try to pronounce. Now these things over here are interesting. These little ones off to the side, they're called activation suffixes. You'd have the tribe name, and then there is a master key, a frequency that would open up the DNA template to let the rest in, so then the rest could work. So using the tribe names to begin activation of the tribal shield, what it used to be in the old days is you would have a group assemble, and very often they'd be groups made of various tribes. So each one would begin sounding, singing their tribal tones. And you'd have a group, all of them singing different ones, and you'd have to build a critical mass. Like these guys would really get into it. I mean, you'd have a group of people really belting it out, and this was their way of being, Like you're not going to go and activate your tribal shield and start singing down at the, I don't know, we did that down at the Empire State Building. So actually we did that in December. Yeah. But it's not always necessary to use auditory tones. You can do it in your head, but it is more effective if you let the tones come out the 5th chakra and directly out into sound. But of course we're in America in the year 2001, so you want to do it privately probably, or in small groups where people, you don't care if people look at you funny. These tones, if you use them, and the idea is to use them, you have to play with them a little bit, but there's a natural rhythm to them. And at first you kind of like, you find, what is that? What is the rhythm to that? What's the syntax there? I don't know how to get it. Play with it. And you'll find the right way for it to be used with your frequency. Okay? Everybody will probably pronounce them a little differently, and that's okay. The basic soundings are the ones underneath. So what I'm going to do is, just because we didn't have time, because this was just given to us overnight, we will have a sheet. This is going to be in the chart pack for those who want to buy the chart pack. But we'll also have a sheet of just this for people who aren't going to buy the chart pack, that you can take it and start using it. And if you want to be creative, you can also, it will accelerate things if you do start playing with the other ones as well, because you'll be filling in frequencies more quickly. I thought it was amazingly simple. That, wow, just a name, just chanted kind of like over and over until you get it like there's a sing-songness to it. If you say something over and over and over again enough times, you'll start to find it talks back to you, and it has a flow of its own, that it kind of like gets your brain going in a way where it almost gets a sing-song quality to it. These work that way. They will teach you, if you work with them, just play with sound and how you're used to using sound. And play with them a few times, then sit quiet and listen. And see if you get any, oh, no, that went this way. You might get it's an up on that note rather than a down. The songs will sing back to you if you play with the tones, where you'll start to get a feel of how you're supposed to sing them. And the singing can be as a monotone mantra. They can be spoken, but there's a quality of breath that happens through singing that's much more full. It's much more of an energy breath when one sings. You're bringing energy up and through the lungs. Where talking is much shorter. The breaths are shorter. They're not as fluid. They're not as, it's kind of like the difference between a straight line and a wave. If you can get them to the point where you can start singing it to yourself, that would help. Now what I'll try to do, this is going to be fun, okay? I'm going to try to say them, and this is about the second time I've looked at them, so I'm right here with you. Yeah. The first one is Araya Zurta Ra. Araya Zurta Ra. Araya Zurta Ra. Araya Zurta Ra. Now let's listen for a minute and see if anybody can pick up the song underneath it, because there is a way to put that musically. And everybody's going to get a different one. I'm just told it's meant to go that way. one I've got. Anybody else get a distinct sense of how you would sing that? It may take a while to play with the words before it comes. Yeah, it will sound like one of those like choirs on the first day of practice. The idea is, that's all right. You should have heard us trying to sing the 3 rounds of the Ome Da all together. We still haven't got that far in a group yet. 3 verses of it all together with different words that are not in English. All right. Now, what I'm going to say is I will go through the basic pronunciation of them, the way they're phonetically, so you get an idea of how they sound. Then the best thing to do if you want this to work for you is play with them, like when you get them home, play with them. And, okay, this is an interesting combination of sounds. What does my being want to do with this? Play with the sounds and let them vibrate. Let them vibrate in your throat. Feel them in your throat and in your heart chakra a bit. Even if you have to drag them out a little bit, like feel the vibration to it. You may get different tones. See, I just got a different lilt on it. The more I hear it, the more it's picking up a characteristic, and I know that if I go play with it, I'll find a way that's the way I need to sing it. You can find that too. If you play with it a while, you may get 6 different melodies. That's almost it. It doesn't quite sound, no, it wants to do this. There will be a point if you play with them where, your body says, that's it, that's the vibration, that's how to hold it in this body. That's the one that'll work with your tribal shield. Okay? There's variations in the frequencies. If we sing it high or sing it low, you have to let it come from you. Because if I give you the sounds of this and say, here, sing it this way, that might activate my tribal shield, but it might not activate yours. You need to find your relationship to those sound combinations, and it's there. If you know it's there, it won't be as hard to find. Okay? It's simply repeating 2 tones. You would use the 12th one, and then you would bring it down to the first one. Now that one, let's see how we can pronounce that. Azutu Ishu There's almost an accent on that one. My lips go into saying it with an accent for some reason. Azutu Ishu is what I get out of it. For some reason, it's like I'm saying something, but I don't know what. Azutu Ishu Raise it up? Yep. I'm not trying to be lazy here, but my ankles are swelling. What happens if I don't sleep and I'm on my feet a lot? Okay, there we go. Azu tu ishu And there's on the sound, it's almost like the tongue curls. It's not a it's a Yeah, and that does something different with the vibration, and you can feel it. Azu tu ishu Now let's see if we strung them together. So you can remember how to say the first one. Araya zutara izutu isha Oh, I didn't trip over it. Yeah. Now see, it's not as hard as remembering 25 steps to a temporary Maharic seal. However, it has its challenges. But it's a little more fun, all right? Basic sound tones, but they're the right sound tones. That's what's important. These are the sound combinations that go with the 144 fire letters in the tribal shield. Every human being has combinations of those fire letters. So these would work for every human being. If you use this one and this one, you'll get the benefit of the rest. But if you want to, somewhere in there is your specific coding. It may not be Tribe 12 or Tribe 1. They'd still work for you. You still activate subharmonics of them. But tomorrow we're going to try to help you find. And you can find it by the fact that every time the races were reseeded or resettled after cataclysms and things, they were always put back in the same place. So if you can have any idea of your genetic origins, of your ancestral origins, where your father's fathers came from, you're basically, I'm Irish and German or something like that. That would give you a clue, okay, who are Irish people and German people. Tomorrow we'll get into looking at the maps and keys chart that shows you the regions that go with the stargates. So you would know that, let's say, if, let me see if I can remember one of them, if you were tribe 10, you would probably be from some area of the Middle East. You would be from some place like Iran or Iraq. That would be the ancestral origins. You can get close by tracing what you know about your ancestral origins, then using your own intuition to feel it out. Because you'll have combinations. Right now, because everybody's been so mixed up genetically with each other and with other things, that we have pieces of all sorts of things. But there's still going to be a dominant one that was the original one that was yours. That's when you just kind of turn the intuitions on a little and say, okay, it might be tribe 4 and 6, one of those. Feel out which one feels right. Douse it. Do a pendulum on it. Whatever way you have of communicating with the parts of yourself that you say, okay, higher self, help me to know which one it is. It may just come to you. You're tribe 2. You know what I mean? But when you can find that, that'll be very useful when you get the stuff from tomorrow. Because I'm going to give you a copy of the chart that shows the basic layout of where the 24 key sites are. And that would be the 12 gate sites and the 12 activation sites that go with them. So you'd basically have like tribe 2 would be at gate 2 site, but also at a different location at the Q site or the activation site for gate 2. So this is why tribe 2, tribe 2 wouldn't just be in one location. They're actually distributed around. So with that, you'll have something to work with to like get more specific as far as what your coding goes. But all you need to activate the tribal shield. Now you're not going to see it like what we just did by stumbling through trying to pronounce them for the first couple of times together. That alone, saying them once or twice, is not going to do it. You don't have to drown yourself in it for 6 weeks, but you need to take it into a meditation space and treat it like a mantra for a little bit. Say the sound tones over. Get past the point where there'll be some part of you right about here goes, this is silly, get past that. All right, because some of us will have that reaction where there's just like the 3D mind kind of goes, what's this? It makes no sense to me, therefore it's not valid. You have to get past that little dweller on the threshold and say, yes, well, it makes no sense to you, but somebody out there knows better, so we'll just play with it anyway. If you play with them, and repetition is where it comes from. Each time you say them, particularly when you put them in song, you're building up scalar wave patterns. If you build them up to a critical mass of frequency, that's what's going to activate the tribal shield. Now what they used to do, they had in the Palladori races, had this down to an art. They could activate them immediately just by running through them once. But that's because since the time they were very small children, they were taught to sing the songs of their soul. These were the songs of their soul. And they were taught, they memorized them and they knew them, and they would get subharmonics on them that would come through and all sorts of things. The tribal name was sacred to those races because they knew what it stood for and they knew what it did. So if you work with it for a bit, it'll be a lot easier than some of the other things that take a little bit longer to do activations. It's simply, if you practice it for a while, even if you want to run them down, it's a little more complicated than do, re, mi, but you can just simply run them down as mantras. Say, 12 to 11 to 10, all the way down to 1. Or if you want to do a short version, go 12 and 1 to get, the 13 combination. You will be able to activate the tribal shield with this. Now, the tribal shield isn't something that activates and then stays on forever. It's like a temporary Maharic seal. Until the full 12-strand DNA template is activated and holding, and that's not going to happen until the planetary grids can hold a race that can do that, it will turn on sometimes and then shut down again. The frequency will come in and then it will become dormant again. It'll be up to you to regulate when you want to bring it in. In the old races, they used to they knew that they didn't need the whole Kundalini frequencies from the primal sound fields running through them on their daily, for daily purposes. Now, if they needed to do some healing on themselves, or if they needed to do some healing for someone else, or for the animal kingdom, or for the planet, then they'd turn it on. They would turn it on by singing a few rounds of their tribal song, of their soul song. They would also, after they used the tribal shield activation songs for a little bit, they would start to get the Maharic songs, which are the ones, if you could look at the tribal shield as a big disc, and then your personal Maharic shield as a smaller disc within that disc, they would activate this one, which is the tribal shield. They'd use the songs for that. And then they would start to get subharmonics of the personal Christos songs, that belonged to just you. And then they would sing them all together, and they would like make rounds of them. And they would progressively build the frequency in their body. They'd bring more and more in. And then they would also combine it with dance. There were certain types of dance, circle dancing, where they would begin to spin the Merkaba fields, and they would get